So in this video I'm taking a partial impression for a partial denture, and as you can see I'm using a silicone putty to just do the border moulding for this special tray. Pop it in the mouth, wait until it sets, and then I use a scalpel to remove any of the putty that's touching the natural teeth. And this is important because if you don't remove it, you can get compression on those teeth, especially if you're doing a metal frame denture. There's going to be no tolerance, and so that putty will compress. We take it out of the mouth, it spring back, therefore distorting the impression. It's not by much, but it'll be enough to stop the denture from fitting. So it does compress on the soft tissues, but not as much. And obviously the soft tissues are compressive themselves. So if you get a little bit of compression, it may mean that the denture might need a little bit of easing in that area, but it's a lot easier to do than it is if you've got compression against the hard tissues. So, and I use some tweezers just to help remove those little bits. And then I use a light body, and this is probably the most difficult bit, is guessing how much impression material you're going to need, because if you have too little, obviously it's going to leave bubbles and gaps and spaces where you don't want them, and if you put too much in, it's going to go down the patient's throat. Now in another video I will show you how I insert the tray, but just as a quick guide, you put the tray in with it tilting forward first, and then you angle it without pushing it all the way up, but you're just getting the teeth in first, and then you're slowly tilting it to push it up at the back, and then you push it up at the front, so the material comes up over the front of the flange. So let me just explain it again. So as your tray goes in, you don't just push it in and push it up, because all the material that's in there will come out down the back. So what we do is we put the tray in at this sort of angle, push it up, but then we kind of angle it like this and then push it up at the front. So as it's angled up, it kind of seals the back, and then as you push it, you're trying to get the material to come up over the flanges at the front, so it's pushing the lips out and it's not all being lost down the throat, and that can help prevent getting bubbles in the palate and things like that. And as you can see on there, I've just added a little bit of orange material. That's because the orange material is a lot more flexible, and so when it goes in between these interdental spaces, it just tears out a lot easier, and it makes it easy to remove the tray without doing too much damage. And then I just use some little scissors, snip out any of the distorted areas. So when you take it out, obviously this silicone will stretch, distort, and that's not usable, so that's just going to give you a false impression. So I usually snip these little areas out. And by the way, this makes the teeth stronger as well when you're casting the impression, because they're joining up, so you've got more of a solid block than all the little individual teeth. When I filled the tray with impression material, I then picked up my mouth mirror. When I inserted it and you're pushing it up, if any of the material does come out the back, you can quickly scoop it out with the mouth mirror, and that will, you know, reduce a lot of discomfort for your patient, and it will make it far less likely that you will get in a mess where the patient starts gagging and then you have to remove it before it's set properly and all that business. And then as you see, when I took the impression out, there's very, very little of the impression material came out the back. That's years and years of practice to be able to fill the tray with the right amount without it all spilling out down the back of the tray. And it is just a case of trial and error. And what I'll do, I'll make another video, because sometimes I get it wrong and I don't put enough in, and then you'll have gaps and spaces that then need to be filled. And the thing with this impression material, is addition cured impression material, is that you can add to it, but what you can't do is leave those tooth sections in and try and add to it that way. And you can't just do a partial rectification on it. You have to do what I did with that scalpel blade. You take out all the tooth areas, all the silicone, peel it out with some tweezers, and then refill it and do the whole thing again. And you have to do that even if the bubble's in the palate and it's not even touching the teeth. You have to remove those teeth areas. And in those sort of situations, you need to just check that once you've removed them, it's just check to make sure that the impression tray with all that border is still going in correctly. There's no interference for some of the other teeth. If there is, just take your scalpel, just remove some more bits so it comes in and out easily, and then just load the tray again. This time it will be easier because you're only putting enough material just to fill the space of where the teeth are, but you do have to spread it out over the whole palate, but more importantly around the periphery to get that peripheral seal, especially if it's a edentulous patient. And then you just put it back in again, and again it's really important, make sure that the impression material is set completely before you remove the impression. Otherwise the distortion won't be so obvious, and it will just be the difference between a denture fitting and a denture not fitting if you get any distortion in the front teeth. Another thing you can do is you can use the back of your lacron, the little spoon portion of the lacron, and just push into the tips of the teeth just to see if they're spongy and they're moving. It means you've got some distortion there. But if it feels quite firm, then you know that the likelihood is that there isn't going to be any distortion, and it'll be a really good. But in my experience, those distortions, you only get them if you take them out too soon, which is why I always put a little bit of silicone on my glove. Just to reiterate what I've said about in other videos, you purge a bit of the first silicone because that doesn't set properly when it first starts to mix. Then you fill the tray, then you put a little bit on your glove, then you insert it, and then you'll check in on your glove. Once it's set on your glove, you can be pretty sure that it's going to be set in the mouth. The only occasions when it might not be is if it's a particularly big tray and you've got lots of impression material in there. Sometimes it can take a little bit longer. The other thing is if it's winter and it's pretty cold outside, if the heating's not on in the surgery all the time and it gets cold at night, then those silicone cartridges can get cold, and that will slow down. But even if it's then warm in the room, it might set on your hand a little bit quicker, but the gun's still going to be cold, and so you need to allow for that as well. And I've also noticed that some people, the mouth breathers, they come in and they got a really cold mouth. They might have been walking for an hour out in the freezing cold. They come in, and when you take an impression, the cold mouth is going to have an effect on the setting time of that impression material as well. So if you've got hot hands and they've got a cold mouth, that's going to set first. So it is just a guide, and you do need to be a little bit flexible with the amount of time that you leave it in. And the only reason why you'll be taken out sooner rather than later is if the patient's gagging and things like that. So you just need to take those sort of things into consideration. And sometimes I'll delay putting the impression in the patient's mouth just for a few seconds, just to give me a little bit more time of it starting the curing process before I put it in, so it's not in the patient's mouth for too long. That's just another one of those tips for when you've got the patients that gag quite a lot. Anyway, I'll say again, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.